Not just the move, but everything that came with it, the change, the silence, the unknown. Most people my age dream of spending their final years in a familiar place, surrounded by family and old friends. Me? I was stepping into a city I didn't know, with nothing but a few boxes and memories of a home that now belonged to someone else. Still, I didn't regret my decision. Every time Edmund's voice echoed in my mind, "Get out of here," I felt a quiet strength settle inside me. That moment became my turning point. He saw me as weak, someone who needed guidance, control, orders. But I proved him wrong. I didn't beg. I didn't plead. I simply left. The moving truck rolled in around 3 p.m. The men were efficient, polite. And they brought in everything I'd chosen to keep. Just a few pieces of furniture that had meaning to me. An old rocking chair that had been my sanctuary during sleepless nights. A small writing desk I'd owned since before Edmund was born. And a bedside table that had once held his baby monitor. The rest I would buy slowly, one piece at a time. Making this small apartment feel like my own space. By evening, I had unpacked the basics just enough to function. Clean sheets, towels, a few dishes, and enough clothes for the week. Everything else could wait. My body was tired, but I felt a strange spark within me. Like I had shed something heavy and stepped into a version of myself I hadn't seen in years. Sitting on the small balcony, sipping hot tea, I watched the sun sink into the ocean. A soft breeze brushed my face, and I wondered what was happening. Back in Alba, Edmund was due to come by tomorrow. He'd be expecting to find me, worn down and ready to give in to his plan for Sunny Hills. But instead, he'd find an empty house and my note. I had thought long and hard about what to write. I wanted to pour out the hurt, the disappointment, all the things I'd kept inside. But I also wanted to stay dignified, calm, in control. And so I wrote, "Edmund, when you told me to get lost, I decided to take your advice, just not in the way you expected. I sold the house. Not to you, but to a young couple who genuinely value it. They move in next week. I kept the money from the sale, because it was mine to begin with. My home, my decision. I'm starting over away from Albemarle and away from you. You wanted to be the master of that house. Well, now you can buy it, if you can afford it, or find another one. Either way, it's no longer my concern. I've often wondered where I went wrong raising you. How did a kind boy grow into a man who tells his mother to get lost? Maybe we spoiled you. Maybe we were too harsh. I don't have the answer. But I do know this. You're not the son I hoped you'd become. Don't look. For me, don't call. I don't want to see you or your family. Maybe someday I'll be ready to forgive. But not today, Mum." As I read the words in my mind, there was no guilt, no hesitation. Only the calm belief that I had done what needed to be done. Edmund would read the letter tomorrow, and I imagine his response: confusion, anger, maybe. Even sadness. But those emotions? They were his to deal with, not mine. I finished my tea and went inside, closing the balcony door gently behind me. Tomorrow would be a new day, the first of a life I was finally choosing on my own. Meanwhile, back in Albemarle, about 100 miles away, Edmund Holloway was still at work. He sat in his corner office, hunched over the last of his daily reports, already thinking about the next day's task. On his desk, lying in plain sight, was a glossy brochure for Sunny Hills, complete with smiling elderly faces and bright green gardens. He planned to bring it to his mother tomorrow, convinced that once she saw it, she would finally understand. In his mind, it was all arranged. She'd move into the nursing home. He, Tabitha, and the kids would move into her house. They'd renovate it, make it theirs, and start fresh. It was a perfect plan. He'd even started calculating how to fund the home improvements, assuming they'd use some money from the sale of their current house. He felt no guilt about the way he'd spoken to her. Harsh? Maybe. But necessary, he thought. His mother clung too tightly to the past. She needed to be pushed. And he gave her that push. Surely she'd had a week to come to her senses. After all, she had no real choice. That house was too big for her. Too much to maintain. Her pension barely covered her needs. And he certainly wasn't going to dip into his own finances to preserve a place that served no practical purpose anymore. Satisfied with his thoughts, Edmund packed up his briefcase and prepared to leave the office. Tomorrow he'd go straight to his mother's house after work. They would have a calm, rational talk. Maybe even visit Sunny Hills together. Everything in his mind would go smoothly. She would understand that this was for her own good. Next day passed like any other. Meetings, financial reports, small talk over lunch. At 4 p.m., Edmund shut his laptop, grabbed his coat, and headed for the door. "Leaving early, Mr. Holloway?" his secretary asked. "Yes," he said, adjusting his tie. "Going to see my mom. We've got an important conversation ahead." "Give her my best," she said with a smile. "She's such a sweet lady." Edmund nodded. He didn't talk much about his mother at work, but she had stopped by his office once or twice, and her warmth had made an impression. No one at the office knew what. He really planned. It was private family business. On the way to her house, he stopped at a small flower shop and picked out a bouquet of lily, her favorite. A peace offering, he thought. To ease into the discussion as he pulled up to the house, he noticed something different right away. The rose bushes lining the front yard had been trimmed, and the driveway was freshly swept. Strange. She never hired a gardener before she couldn't afford to. Maybe a neighbor had helped out. Or maybe ... He stepped out of the car, bouquet in hand, still unaware of the truth waiting just behind that front door. Edmund went to the door and rang the bell. No one answered. He rang the bell again, waited, and without waiting for an answer, pulled out his key. The door opened easily, and he entered the house. "Mom," he called out as he walked into the hallway. "Are you home?" There was silence. Only the ticking of the old clock on the wall broke the stillness of the house. Edmund walked into the living room and froze. The room looked different. Many things were missing. Their photographs on the mantelpiece, his mother's favorite blanket on the sofa, the collection of porcelain figurines he and his father had collected over the years. "Mom," he called again, feeling his anxiety rising. He walked quickly around the first floor, the kitchen, the drawing room, the small study. Everywhere it was the same. No personal belongings, empty shelves, clean surfaces. It was as if the house were being prepared for sale. Edmund froze, struck by a sudden realization. No, it was impossible. Mother couldn't. She wouldn't dare. He ran up the stairs to the second floor and peered into his mother's bedroom. It was empty. Closed open, no belongings. The bedside table, where his father's picture always stood, was empty. In the bathroom, there was no toothbrush, no towels, no mom's creams and lotions. There was not a single box of old things in the guest bedroom, which she used as a storage room. Edmund felt a chill run down his spine. What was going on? Where had Mum gone? Where had all her things gone? He walked back down to the first floor and into the kitchen. And then he saw it. A white envelope on the table next to the house keys. An envelope with his name written in his mother's neat handwriting. Edmund opened the envelope with trembling hands and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. As he ran his eyes over the first lines, he felt the ground go from under his feet. I've sold the house. Not to you, but to a married couple. No, he whispered. No, 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 he read on. And with each line, his face grew paler and paler. When he reached the end, the letter fell out of his hands. She couldn't have done it, Hess said aloud, as if trying to convince himself. It was some kind of joke. But deep inside, he knew it wasn't a joke. The empty house, the lack of belongings. Formal tone of the knot all told him that Mom had indeed sold the house and left, and she had no intention of coming back. Edmund sank back into his chair, feeling panic rising inside. What would tell Tabitha? What would he tell the children? They had already planned out who would take what room, what renovations they would make. Rory had already chosen the wallpaper for his new room, and Yvette had insisted on converting the small bedroom into a dressing room. And now they had no Mom's house, no money from selling it. Nothing. She had no right. Edmund muttered, feeling anger replaced shock. This is our family home. Father wanted it to stay in the family. But deep down he knew that Mother had every right to house the house as she saw fit. The house was registered to her. She had paid the mortgage with Dad. She had taken care of it all these years. And now the house belonged to strangers. A married couple, as Mom wrote. People who weren't even related to their family. Edmund jumped up from his chair and began to pace their kitchen. Something had to be done. We need to find Mom. Convince her to cancel the deal. Maybe it wasn't too late. Maybe the papers hadn't been signed yet. He pulled out his cell phone and dialed Mom's number. Ringing, and then the answering machine. You've reached Nancy Holloway. Leave a message after the beep. Mom, it's Edmund. He began, trying to speak calmly. I just read your note. Please call me back, we need to talk. It's very important. He hung up and immediately called back. It went to voicemail again. He left another message, less quiet. After the fifth attempt, Edmund gave up. Mom was clearly not going to take his calls. Maybe she'd changed her number or just ignoring him. He sank back into the chair and reread the note. I'm starting a new life away from Albemarle and you. Where could she be? She had no close friends except maybe that woman Pearl with whom she sometimes socialized. Pearl? Of course, she must know where Mama is. Maybe she was even helping her with the sale of the house. Edmund quickly found Pearl Willis's contact on his phone. Mom had written it down in case of an emergency. Well, that was exactly the situation right now. Hello. A woman's voice answered the phone. Pearl, this is Edmund Holloway, NY's son. I need to speak to you. Ah, Edmund. Her voice war-scolded. I've been expecting your call. Do you know where my mother is? He asked bluntly. Yes, I do, Pearl replied calmly. But I won't tell you. She didn't want you to know. You wouldn't understand. Edmund took a slow breath, trying to steady his voice. There's been a mistake. I just need to talk to her. A mistake? Pearl's voice cut in, sharp and sarcastic. You're calling it a mistake now? You told your own mother to get the hell out of her house, Edmund. Edmund went quiet. So his mother had confided in Pearl. That stung. It was in the heat of the moment, he murmured. I didn't mean it that way. No, that's exactly what you meant, Pearl snapped. You wanted her gone so you could have the house. That she wasn't as foolish as you thought, Edmund. I just wanted her to live somewhere safer. More comfortable. Safer? Pearl laughed bitterly. No, you were thinking about that house. You didn't want to worry about her. You wanted the property. Edmund's throat tightened. You helped her sell it? He asked, though he already knew the answer. I'm a realtor, Pearl replied, sounding completely unapologetic. It's what I do. And I'll have you know she got a fantastic deal. Homes like that, in that condition, in that neighborhood, they don't come along often. How much? Edmund's voice cracked. How much did she get? Pearl gave a smirk he could hear through the phone. That's confidential. But let's just say she won't have to worry about money for the rest of her life. She's doing quite well. All thanks to you, actually. If you hadn't tried to shove her out, she never would have taken that step. Edmund swallowed hard. His mother had sold the house, pocketed the money, and vanished. And it had all started with a few careless words. Tell her I need to speak with her, he said finally. It's important. I'll let her know, Pearl replied. But don't hold your breath. She's determined to start fresh without you. She can't just vanish, Edmund exclaimed. She's my mother. She's the mother you told to leave, Pearl reminded him coldly. And she listened. You should respect her choice. Then she hung up. The silence that followed was heavy and sharp. Edmund stood frozen in the middle of the kitchen, his phone still in hand. The emptiness of the house echoed around him. Everything he'd planned, everything he'd built his future on, had crumbled overnight. The house was no longer his. The money he thought would help cover his mother's care, and maybe leave some for his own family, was gone. And now his mother was gone too. He sank slowly into a chair, heart pounding with panic. How would he explain this to Tabitha? To the kids? How could he tell them that the home they dreamed of would never be theirs? He picked up the note again. He read the final lines over and over. Don't try to find me. I don't want to see you or your family again. Maybe someday I'll forgive you, but right now I need distance and time. Did she really mean it? Had she truly cut all ties with him and her grandchildren? The sentence that haunted him most replayed in his mind. You're not the man I hoped to raise. That was the deepest wound of all. His mother had always believed in him, stood by his side. Now, she had walked away. Edmund folded the note carefully and tucked it into his pocket. He had to go home now. He had to face Tabitha and break the news. He stepped out the front door and turned for one last look at the house where he'd grown up, the home that once held laughter, birthdays, and warm Sunday dinners. He had imagined it being his someday, but now it belonged to strangers. And his mother had chosen a new path without him. All because of one moment. A few angry words. Get out of here. Mum. Who would have thought she'd take them so seriously and act on them so completely? He closed the door and dropped the keys into the mailbox, just like the note had told him. Then he got in his car and started driving home. In his head, he rehearsed the conversation with Tabitha. It was not going to be an easy evening. 6 months went by, and Bridlewood. Bridlewood was exactly what I needed. A quiet coastal town, tucked away from the noise and stress. Everyone knew each other here, but they also respected space. No one looked at me like I was just some forgotten widow or a burden waiting to be shuffled aside. If anything, most of the residents were like me. Retired, independent, still full of life, still searching for peace. My little rented apartment didn't take long to feel like home. I decorated it just the way I liked. Soft curtains that danced with the sea breeze, cozy furniture that welcomed me at the end of each day, shelves lined with books, my favorites, both fiction and biography. I even bought a few cheerful paintings at the town's weekend art fair. Nothing fancy, but they made the place mine. Each morning began with sunrise. I'd fix myself a simple breakfast, then step out onto the balcony with a cup of tea. I'd watch the waves roll in, steady and strong. After that, I'd take a walk down the beach. In those early hours, the sand was empty except for the birds, and sometimes a few familiar faces. Martha, who ran the local bakery, always walked her little Corgi along the shore. Howard, a retired professor, swam each morning no matter the season. And Elizabeth, a painter, came with her easel to capture the golden light on canvas. Little by little, those chance meetings turned into friendships. Martha invited me to her weekly book club. It met in the back room of her bakery over coffee and pastries. Howard introduced me to a circle of classical music lovers who organized house concerts. And Elizabeth? She convinced me to try painting. To my surprise, I wasn't terrible. In fact, I had a knack for watercolors, something I never would have discovered if I'd stayed back in that old life. Then, at the end of my 6-month lease, Michael, my realtor, called with an offer. "The landlord wants to sell," he said, "and he's giving you first choice." "You've been a dream tenant," I paused. I hadn't touched most of the money from the Albemarle house sale. I lived simply nice meals here and there, a few concert tickets, new books. Nothing extravagant. I had everything I needed. Buying this apartment would mean something bigger, though. It would mean this town wasn't just a stop along the way. It would mean this life, this new, quieter, simpler life was mine now. "I'll think about it," I told Michael. That evening, I sat out on my balcony, watching the waves. They came in and went out, never resisting, never clinging, just moving with purpose. There was something comforting in that, something wise. The next day, I called Michael and told him I wanted to buy an apartment. The paperwork took a few weeks, but at the end of April, I became the full owner of my new home. It was a strange feeling to own real estate again, to put down roots again. But this time it was different. It was my choice, my decision, my home. In honor of the housewarming, I threw a small party for my new friends. Martha brought freshly baked bread and cakes. Howard brought a bottle of good wine. Elizabeth brought a small watercolor of my house. We sat on the balcony, watched the sunset, talked about books, music, art, and shared stories from our lives. "You never talk about your family, Nancy," Martha remarked when the conversation turned to children and grandchildren. I hesitated, not knowing what to say. Over the months, I had deliberately avoided talking about the past, about Albemarle, about Edmund and his family. "We're not very close," I said at last. "I have Asen, a daughter-in-law, 2 grandchildren, but we haven't spoken in a long time." "That's sad." Martha sighed. "Family is so important, especially at our age." "Not always," Howard argued. "Sometimes family ties bring more pain than joy. Sometimes it's better to have a family of your own, family of friends, of people who really appreciate you." I smiled gratefully at him. Howard understood. He too had a complicated relations with his children. His son and daughter lived in different states and rarely visited their father. "To a new family," Elizabeth offered, raising her glass. "To a new family," we said in unison. That night after the guests left, I couldn't sleep for a long time. I thought about Edmund, about Tabitha, about Rory and Ived. I wondered how they'd lived for those 6 months. Had Edmund managed to buy a new house? Was he still angry with me for what I'd done? I felt no remorse. Edmund got what deserved. But sometimes I felt sad, especially when I thought of my grandchildren. They were still children despite their adolescence and ostentatious coldness. They were just repeating their parents' behavior. Maybe someday, when they grew up, they would understand. I woke up this morning with a firm decision. Stop thinking about their past. I have a new life, new friends, new hobbies. I have to move forward. And he really started to move forward. Every day I became more and more immersed in the life of Bridalwood. I joined a volunteer program at the local library where I read books to children twice a week. I signed up for a watercolor painting class, taught by Elizabeth at her studio. I even started working at Martha's bakery just a few hours a day, not for money, but for companionship and to feel useful. In June, when the weather got really warm, Howard suggested I join a group of retirees, planning a trip to Europe. 2 weeks, Italy and France, he said. A small group, just 8 people, no tedious excursions, just what we were interested in. Museums, concerts, local cuisine. I hesitated. I'd never been abroad in my entire life. Henry and I had always set aside money for Edmund's education, for home repairs, for unexpected expenses. Traveling to Europe seemed like something out of the realm of fantasy. I don't know, Howard, I said. I've never flown across the ocean before. All the more reason to try it. He smiled. At our age, you have to seize every opportunity. Who knows how many we have left? He was right. The money from the sale of the house was in the account, and I could afford the trip. Why not take the chance? To see the world. Okay, I nodded. I'll go. The next few weeks passed in a flurry of activity passport applications, ticket purchases, hotel choices, itineraries. I bought a new suitcase, comfortable shoes for long walks, guidebooks for Rome, Florence, Venice, and Paris. Each day I became more and more fired up about the upcoming trip. The trip exceeded all my expectations. Italy with its ancient ruins, majestic cathedrals, cozy squares, and incredible food. France with its elegant Paris, picturesque countryside, and exquisite tunes. I greedily absorbed new impressions, photographed everything, tasted dishes that I had only read about before, and talked to the locals in a mixture of English and sign language. Howard turned out to be the perfect companion. Attentive, educated, with a good sense of humor. He knew the history of every place we visited, could talk for hours about artists whose works we saw in museums, about composers whose music we listened to at concerts. One evening, sitting in a small restaurant in Venice overlooking the Grand Canal, I caught myself thinking that for the first time in many years, I felt truly happy. Not just content or calm, but happy. With that light, airy feeling. Inside. With a smile that never leaves my face. With the wish that this moment would last forever. Here's to a life that's just beginning, Howard said, raising his wine glass. Here's to life just beginning, I repeated, clinking glasses with his dot back in. Bridalwood, I found myself looking at my town with new eyes. After majestic Rome and elegant Paris, it seemed small and provincial, but at the same time cozy and familiar. It was my home, a place I had chosen for myself, a place where I was accepted as I was. Life fell into a nice rhythm. Morning walks on the beach, work at the library and bakery, evenings with the book club of friends. I started planning new trips, maybe Spain next spring or Greece. The world was suddenly so big and accessible. In the fall, when the tourist season was over, and Bridalwood was quiet and almost deserted again, I decided to take swimming lessons. All my life, I'd been afraid of deep water. But now, living by the ocean, it seemed counterintuitive. The instructor, a young guy named Jason, was patient and attentive. He didn't rush me, let me get used to the water gradually, and praised me for every little success. By the end of October, I could swim a short distance along the shore, and it filled me with pride, like a child learning to ride a bike. You're making amazing progress, Mrs. Holloway, Jason said after one of the classes. Most people your age wouldn't even dare to try. Probably because most people my age are afraid of change, I replied. And I realized that it's never too late to start something new. He smiled. That's a great approach to life. My grandfather is the same way. He learned to play the saxophone at 75, and now he's in a jazz band. The idea of being able to start playing in a jazz band at 75 amused me and inspired me at the same time. Really? Why not? Who says that at an advanced age you should only sit in a rocking chair and knit socks? In November, when the weather turned cool for swimming, I decided to try another new hobby, cooking classes. Martha organized them in her bakery once a week in the evenings when the main crowd was over. Nothing complicated, she assured me. Just a few simple but tasty dishes that anyone can make at home. It turned out to be fun to cook with friends. We learned how to make pasta from scratch, bake bread, make complex sauces, and create gourmet desserts. After each class, we sat around a large table in the back room of the bakery and enjoyed tasting the results of our labors, drinking wine, and discussing plans for the next class. One such evening, when I returned home smelling of vanilla and cinnamon after my Christmas cookie class, I found a letter in my mailbox. A regular paper letter, which in itself was a rarity in the age of email and messengers. I pulled out the envelope and looked at the return address. My heart skipped a beat. Albemarle. The handwriting was unfamiliar to me, but the postmark left no doubt. The letter was from my old town. When he entered the apartment, I put the envelope on the kitchen table and stared at it for a long time, hesitating to open it. Who could have written to me? Edmund. But how did he know my address? Perhaps Pearl. But we talked regularly by telephone. So why would she write a letter? Finally pulling myself together, I tore open the envelope with a mix of curiosity and dread. Inside, I found a single sheet of paper, folded neatly, the handwriting elegant and unmistakably feminine. It was written with care, but I could already feel the weight behind each word before reading a single sentence. Dear Nancy, it began. You're probably surprised to get this letter from me. I've been meaning to write for a long time, but kept hesitating. Still, I believe you have every right to know what's happening. This is Tabitha Edmund's wife. I got your address from Pearl. She didn't want to share it, but I convinced her that it was important. Please don't be angry. With her, Edmund still hasn't accepted what happened. He believes you robbed him of something that was his. He's taken it so far that he hired a private investigator to track you down. They haven't found anything yet, but I fear they will eventually. I'm not writing this to alarm you, but to give you a heads up, he's not letting it go. He talks often about how you wronged him, how you need to pay for selling the house. I honestly don't know if he has a legal case, but I know he's angry enough to try. After you left, he wasn't the same. He's constantly irritated. He lashes out mostly at me and the kids. We haven't moved to a new place like he promised. We're still stuck in the same old house, even though it barely fits us anymore. He says he won't move until he finds you, until he gets back what he believes is rightfully his again. I'm not writing to frighten you, but to protect you. Be careful. Try not to let people know where you are. Rory and Yvette ask about you. Now and then, I tell them that you chose to start fresh, that you had every right to. They seem to understand that better than their father does. I truly hope you're happy. After everything you've endured, you deserve a peaceful, joyful life. Sincerely, Tabitha. I sat back in my chair and reread the letter, again and again, each time feeling my anger simmer higher. Edmund, my own son, had hired a private detective to hunt me down. After everything he had said, after trying to shove me out of the very home I built, he still had the audacity to come after me. I stood up, unable to sit still anymore, and started pacing the small apartment, trying to collect myself. From an outsider's perspective, it probably looked harsh, me selling the house and vanishing without saying a word. But what else could I do? He wanted me out, wanted to shove me into some cold, soulless nursing home, just to claim what wasn't his to begin with. I did what I had to do, not out of spite, but to protect myself, to preserve what little independence I had left. No, I didn't feel guilt. I had taken back my life. I returned to the kitchen. My hands were steady as I struck a match and held it to the corner of Tabitha's letter. The flame caught quickly. I dropped the paper into the sink, watching the fire consume it until it was nothing but ash. Then I turned on the faucet, letting the water wash away the last bits. Let Edmund search. Let him throw his money at investigators. He could spend the rest of his days trying to find me. It wouldn't change a thing. I wasn't going back, not to that life, not to his control. I walked over to the window. The ocean stretched endlessly before me, calm and shadowy under the deepening November sky. I looked out at the waves and felt a strength I hadn't known a year ago. I was no longer that fearful, uncertain woman who once sat quietly while her son plotted her exile. I was different now. Stronger. Freer. In these past few months, I have gained more than I ever imagined: confidence, meaningful friendships, interests that made me feel alive again. And I wasn't about to let Edmund take that away. I reached for my phone and dialed Pearl's number. I needed to talk to her, not to scold, but to ensure no more cracks would form in the privacy I had worked so hard to preserve. "Hello?" She answered, her voice warm and familiar. "Pearl, it's me," I said gently. "I need your help." I told her about the letter, about Edmund's stubborn obsession, about my fears. She listened quietly, then reassured me. "Nancy, I only gave Tabitha your address because she seemed genuinely worried about you. I don't think she'd tell Edmund. She's afraid of him too." "I understand," I said. "But please, if Edmund or anyone connected to him comes looking, tell them you don't know where I am. Tell them I could be anywhere: Florida, Arizona, even California." "Of course," Pearl replied. "I won't say a word." She hesitated. "But Nancy, do you really think Edmund would hurt you?" I paused. Did I think he would physically harm me? No. But emotional harm, manipulation, guilt, pressure, that he was capable of. "I just want peace, Pearl," I said softly. "I want a life free from the shadows of the past." After the call, I felt lighter. Pearl had always been someone I could trust, even from afar. She never judged me. She simply understood. That night, I lay awake thinking of Tabitha's words, Edmund's anger, and how quickly life had shifted. Just 1 year ago, I was a widowed woman in my own home, seeing my son and his family on occasion. Now, I was in a sunny coastal town, the owner of a cozy condo, with new friends, a new rhythm, a new outlook, and a son who had paid a stranger to hunt me down. Life is strange like that, full of twists. But I had no regrets. This morning I woke up with a quiet resolve. I would not let fear poison my joy. I would keep living this new life fully, richly, without hiding or second-guessing myself. If Edmund found me, fine. I would face him not with fear, but with dignity. I was no longer a frightened old woman. I was someone who had taken her life back. I stepped out onto the balcony, coffee in hand. The ocean stretched out before me, the waves rolling in and out in their timeless rhythm. There was something ancient and wise in that repetition, a message. Maybe, don't cling to what's gone. Don't fear what's coming. Just keep moving forward. And I will move forward no matter what. Because I know now it's never too late to start a new life. It's never too late to say no to those who disrespect you, even if it's your own children. It's never too late to find new friends, new hobbies, new reasons to wake up in the morning. With a smile, I made the right choice and I haven't regretted it for a second.